You ever feel like you're the only sane one in a family full of actors who never got cast in the drama they thought they deserved? That's how I describe my life. Name's Evan. I'm 33, single, and about as ordinary as a guy can get. I wear the same hoodie 3 days in a row when I work from home. I know my barista's dog's name, and I've never once posted anything on Instagram. But somehow, I wound up in the middle of a real-life soap opera that ended with cops, lawyers, and a jaw-dropping family betrayal I still don't fully believe happened. I never asked for any of this. All I did was inherit a house and try to do the right thing. But I guess when there's money involved, even blood turns cold. Let me back up a little. My grandparents, Henry and Margaret, were the kind of old-school couple you don't see anymore. Married for 57 years, raised 3 kids, worked until their backs gave out, and never missed a Sunday at church. They lived in the same 2-story colonial house for over 4 decades, a place that somehow still smelled like fresh-baked cinnamon rolls and wood polish. That house was more than bricks and paint. It was memory. It was tradition. It was a place where I spent every Christmas morning until I was 25, where my grandpa taught me how to change a tire and my grandma showed me how to make lasagna from scratch. It was a sanctuary from the mess that was the rest of my family. Because the rest of my family? Well, let's just say they didn't inherit my grandparents' sense of loyalty. My mom, Diane, is complicated. Growing up, she had this ability to make you feel like everything was your fault, even if it wasn't. She wasn't abusive in the way movies show, not physically, but emotionally. Oh, she was a maestro. Guilt was her favorite instrument. She could pluck it like a violin string until you felt like apologizing for simply existing. My dad left when I was 10, and she made sure I never forgot who ruined the family. Spoiler alert, it was somehow me. Then there's my older brother, Caleb, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. When he dropped out of college after 2 semesters, it was because college just isn't designed for people like Caleb. He's too smart for the system. When he wrecked my mom's car during a night out drinking, she bought him a new one. Meanwhile, I once got grounded for forgetting to put the cap back on the toothpaste. I learned early that I wasn't part of their club. I was the afterthought, but I didn't mind. Not really. I had my grandparents, and they saw me. When they passed, within 6 months of each other, bless them, it hit me hard. Grandma went first, peacefully, in her sleep. Grandpa followed not long after. Everyone said he just couldn't live without her. At the funeral, my mom and Caleb made this big show of grief, sobbing and clinging to each other like they were starring in some kind of Hallmark special. I watched it all from a few rows back, jaw clenched, because I knew how little they'd shown up while Grandma was sick. I was the one taking her to appointments. I was the one filling her prescriptions and helping Grandpa sort through bills when her mind started to go. They sent flowers. I showed up. That was always the difference. When Grandpa's lawyer called me a few weeks later to discuss the will, I was expecting, I don't know, maybe a sentimental trinket, a watch, a photo, something small. I wasn't expecting the house. But that's exactly what he left me. Not split between family. Not held in trust. He left the entire property, worth around $1.2 million, once you counted the land and the location, solely to me. Clean and clear, aside from an old line of credit they'd taken out for some home repairs and medical bills. At first, I was stunned. Then, almost immediately, I felt this crushing sense of guilt. I could already hear my mom's voice. How could you let them do this to your own family? Your own brother? We're struggling too, you know. But the lawyer must have sensed my hesitation, because he said something that stuck with me. Your grandfather told me. Evan was the only one who ever came through. The only one who never needed to be asked. That house is his now. He'll take care of it. He'll respect it. I'll never forget that. So I took care of it. I didn't sell the house. Didn't flaunt it. I quietly transferred the deed into my name, paid off the remaining balance using savings and some inheritance Grandpa left in a separate account, and kept everything up to date. Taxes, insurance, even the little things like repainting the fence and resealing the driveway. I moved in a month later, not to brag or own anything, but because it felt right. Like I was honoring them by keeping the place alive. Of course, I didn't tell my family right away. That wasn't a secret I wanted to drop over Sunday dinner. At first, they didn't ask questions. Caleb assumed the house was in probate, and that we'd all be splitting it once the lawyers figured things out. I didn't correct him. I figured there'd be a time and place to sit down and explain everything calmly. Legally, everything was mine. But emotionally, That's a minefield you step through slowly. Except Caleb and my mom don't do slow. They bulldoze. It started small. Offhand comments. Little jabs. One time, I mentioned painting the upstairs bedroom, and my mom said, "Hope you're not spending too much. We'll want to redo the place properly once it's listed." I raised an eyebrow. "Listed? For sale?" she said casually. "I mean, obviously we'll all need to agree on the final buyer. But that place is worth a fortune, Evan. Don't get too attached." I wanted to say something then. I really did. But I just nodded and changed the subject. Part of me hoped she'd figure it out on her own. That they'd come around and ask, "Hey, what did Grandpa actually put in the will?" But no, they just assumed. And then they started showing up more. Caleb stopped by once a week. At first, it was under the pretense of checking in, but quickly turned into him critiquing everything I was doing. "You really shouldn't use that paint color. It'll tank the resale value," he said once, walking through the hallway like he was a real estate agent on a tour. Another time, he brought his girlfriend over, and I caught her taking selfies in the living room, saying, "This lighting's gonna be amazing once we get the place and open it up." I already have a Pinterest board for the Reno. It was like they'd already decided I was just squatting in their future investment. My mom wasn't much better. She brought over boxes of old family junk, things she didn't want in her own apartment, and dumped them in the basement. "These belong here," she said, not even asking. "It's the family home. Might as well start clearing out the clutter for when we stage it." She was talking like she already owned it, like she'd just assumed the house would be split down the middle and that I was some kind of glorified house sitter in the meantime. It kept escalating. But the moment I really knew things were about to spiral, that came one Thursday afternoon when I found Caleb in the garage, measuring, tape measure in hand, scribbling notes into his phone. I watched him from the side door, my stomach nodding. "What are you doing?" I asked. He didn't even look up, just getting dimensions. "Thinking of converting this into a guest house. Or maybe a music studio. Gotta make this place modern, man. Grandpa had good bones here, but it's all outdated." He finally looked up and smiled. "Don't worry. You can keep your room. For now. My room." I didn't say anything. I just turned around and went back inside. Locked the door behind me. My hands were shaking. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about me. They didn't see me as the rightful owner, or the grandson who took care of everything while they were busy pretending. No, they saw me as a placeholder, a temporary inconvenience standing in the way of their payday. And I realized I wasn't just going to have to explain things to them. I was going to have to defend what was mine. But I had no idea just how far they'd go, or what they were planning next. And when they showed up at my door that Friday, grinning like they'd already won, I knew I was in for something way bigger than a family argument. That was the day everything changed. I didn't sleep much the night before it happened. Call it instinct, or maybe just the echo of my grandpa's voice telling me to stay sharp, kid. But something had been gnawing at my gut since Tuesday. That's when I got a cryptic text from my mom. "Don't be surprised if things move fast now. Just go with it. It'll be better for everyone." No context. No follow-up. I replied with a simple question mark. She left it on read. I couldn't shake it. I kept replaying her words while I paced through the halls of the house that night, passing family portraits they probably hadn't glanced at in years. I paused in front of one. Me at age 7, missing a front tooth, sitting on Grandpa's lap while Grandma adjusted my crooked bow tie. Caleb was in the corner of the photo, arms crossed, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. Even then, we were different. By morning, the sky was overcast, thick with that sticky, late summer humidity that clings to your skin. I brewed coffee and stared out the window, trying to convince myself I was overthinking things. That the text meant nothing. That maybe she was just emotional. At 11:42 a.m. sharp, the doorbell rang. I wasn't surprised to see Caleb standing there. I was surprised to see he wasn't alone. Behind him stood my mom, her arms folded like she was about to fire someone at a PTA meeting, and this part made my brain short-circuit. A guy in a cheap suit holding a manila folder. He had the posture of someone who played lawyer more than he practiced it. "Morning," Caleb chirped like we were meeting for brunch. I blinked. "What is this?" My mom stepped forward. "We didn't want it to come to this, Evan. But you've left us no choice." "No choice?" I echoed, heart thudding. The fake lawyer guy cleared his throat. "Mr. Thatcher." Evan. I'm here representing the Thatcher family estate and facilitating an order for transfer of possession of property." He handed me the manila folder like it was a gift basket. Inside were a few loosely stapled sheets of what looked like generic templates, one titled Notice to Vacate, another labeled Provisional Asset Agreement. Most of it was filled in with vague, clunky legal language, and Caleb's full name was scribbled into the New Tenant section in pen. I stared at it, then looked up. What is this garbage? Mom clicked her tongue. Let's not be difficult. The house is being reassigned to family, like it should have been from the start. The will was clearly unfair. We've consulted someone. She nodded at Discount Law School over there. And it turns out we have more rights than we thought. Caleb grinned. You're out by the weekend. It was surreal. Like they'd rehearsed this. Like they thought they could bluff me out of my own house. I didn't even raise my voice. I just held the folder out to Caleb and said, You might want to read the name on the title again. He scoffed. What title? I didn't answer. Just turned and walked down the hallway, toward the office where I'd stored all the official documents after the deed transfer. I came back holding the certified title, complete with the county stamp, date, and, most importantly, my name, in big bold letters. I handed it to their lawyer. He flipped through it. His face paled. This isn't, he glanced at my mom. She grabbed it from him, her eyes narrowing. This isn't final, she snapped. This doesn't mean anything. It's legally binding, I said, still calm, but my hands were starting to tremble. You want to contest it? Be my guest. But you're not kicking me out of anything. The silence that followed was thick. Caleb finally snorted and muttered, You always were a selfish little freak. Then they left. No apology. No, we'll talk later. Just a slammed door and the stench of entitlement lingering in the air. I wish I could say that was the worst of it, but it was just the beginning. That night, I couldn't sit still. I paced the living room, the kitchen, even the upstairs landing. I kept thinking about how calculated it all was. The lawyer, the fake documents, the coordinated arrival. They'd really tried to ambush me like I was too dumb to see through it. I thought maybe that would be the end of it. Maybe they'd realized they'd overplayed their hand. But I should have known better. 2 days later, I came home from the grocery store to find a moving truck idling in the driveway. There were 2 guys unloading dolly carts stacked with boxes, both marked Caleb, studio equipment. I blinked twice, thinking maybe they were lost. Then I saw Caleb, in sunglasses, drinking an iced coffee on my porch swing, legs crossed like he owned the place. What are you doing? I asked. He didn't look up. Taking what's mine. One of the movers turned to me, puzzled. You're the owner? Yes, I said. This isn't happening. Put everything back. We already unloaded half of it, man, the guy replied, rubbing the back of his neck. I don't care. I snapped. He's trespassing. Caleb stood up, now clearly annoyed. This isn't over, Evan. You think that piece of paper makes you king of the castle? You forget who earned this house. Mom and I took care of Grandma and Grandpa long before you came sniffing around. My jaw dropped. You didn't even visit them in the hospital. That's not the point, he barked. I walked straight past him, into the house, locked the door behind me, and called the police. They showed up within 20 minutes. The movers were asked to stop immediately. Caleb tried to show them the fake legal documents again, same ones from before. The officer took one look and said, Sir, this appears to be printed off a free template site. This is not enforceable. Caleb got loud. The cops warned him. He left with the movers, hurling one last threat over his shoulder. You just made a big mistake, Evan. I stood there in the driveway long after they were gone. Heart pounding, chest tight. I'd kept it together in front of everyone, but as soon as I stepped back inside, the floodgates opened. I sank onto the floor of the foyer and just sat there, staring at my grandparents' old cuckoo clock, ticking away like nothing had happened. That was the moment it truly hit me. They didn't just want the house. They wanted to erase me from it. From the history, from the memory, from the inheritance. It wasn't enough that they'd ignored Grandpa's will. It wasn't enough that they hadn't lifted a finger during his final months. They wanted to rewrite the story so they could cast themselves as the devoted heirs and paint me as the squatter who got in the way. And the worst part? I saw it in my mom's eyes the last time she looked at me. She believed it. The woman who raised me, who used to cut the crusts off my sandwiches and tuck me in with a kiss on the forehead. Somewhere along the way, she stopped seeing me as her son and started seeing me as a roadblock. It took me a full day to calm down after that. Then I called a real lawyer. His name was Jared Lansing. Tall guy, sharp suit, talked like a surgeon, calm, precise, and a little scary when he needed to be. He reviewed everything: the deed, the will, the attempted eviction, even the moving truck stunt. And he didn't mince words. "You're in the right," he said. "They're bluffing, and badly. But if you want to send a message, one that sticks, I suggest we file a preemptive protection order and notify the county recorder's office of potential harassment regarding property rights. It won't stop them from being jerks, but it will give us leverage if they escalate." "Escalate how?" I asked. He looked me dead in the eye. "If they think you're weak, they might try something bigger next time." I took his advice. I signed every form he handed me, filed every motion. He had a contact at the local precinct. Turns out Jared had helped the department on a few land dispute cases, and within 2 days, I had a patrol schedule set up to swing by the property nightly. Just in case. I didn't tell my mom or Caleb about any of it. Let them think I was still the quiet, awkward little brother. Let them assume I'd just crawl away when things got uncomfortable. Because what they didn't know was, I'd had enough, and I wasn't going to let them take one more thing from me. Not the house. Not the memories. Not my peace. I just didn't expect what happened next. Because 4 days later, they came back. And this time, they didn't come alone. They came back on a Friday. I remember because I was eating leftovers from the Thai place on 6th, pad CEW, medium spicy, and watching an old episode of Frasier when I heard tires crunching over the gravel out front. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe it was the patrol officer doing a drive-by. But when I glanced out the window and saw the truck again, the same damn moving truck from last week, with a new logo slapped on the side, I felt my stomach drop. Only this time, it wasn't just the truck. There were 2 cars behind it. Caleb's gray Mustang, and a silver sedan I didn't recognize. The sedan parked crookedly across my driveway like it owned the space. Out of it stepped my mom, wearing sunglasses even though it was cloudy, and walking like she was heading into a courtroom she knew she'd already won. And next to her, of all people, was Uncle Frank. I hadn't seen Frank in years. He was Grandpa's younger brother, the kind who always had a slick story and a cigar in his jacket. Growing up, I remembered him as the fun uncle. Gave me a Game Boy once and let me watch R-rated movies. But somewhere in my teens, that charm started to curdle. He'd burned bridges all over the family tree. Loan scams, shady business pitches, even tried to sell one of Grandma's antique jewelry boxes at a pawn shop and claimed she told him he could. He vanished after that. Now here he was again, grinning like he'd been invited to Thanksgiving. I didn't open the door. I watched from the window as they all huddled on the front porch. Caleb rang the doorbell twice, then knocked, loud. My phone buzzed with a text. From Mom. "Come outside. Let's make this easy." Easy. There was that word again. Like this was a misunderstanding. Like this was mine to fix. I didn't reply. I called Jared. He picked up on the second ring. "They're back." "Yep. And they brought Uncle Frank." There was a pause. "Call the police. I'm heading there now. What if they force their way in? Then we have a trespassing charge. But don't open that door, Evan." So I didn't. Instead, I stood there, heart thudding in my chest, while my own family stood on the porch like it was theirs. Caleb started talking loud enough for me to hear through the glass. "We're not playing games anymore, Evan. You're squatting in a family asset. That's not just selfish, it's illegal. You're going to lose everything if you keep this up." My mom chimed in. "You don't want to be dragged through court, honey. We'll tell them how you manipulated your grandfather. You think they'll side with you after hearing how you isolated him?" I nearly laughed. Isolated him. I lived in the hospital half those nights while she was off visiting yoga retreats and posting cryptic quotes on Facebook. Frank finally spoke. "Come on, kid. You're smarter than this. You don't want to start a war with your own blood. Walk away with some dignity, and we'll let you keep a slice of the inheritance. Cash. No fuss." It was surreal. Like I was watching a bad play from the worst row in the theater. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run outside and shout, "Are you hearing yourselves?" But I didn't. I stayed put, just like Jared said. The police showed up 12 minutes later. A single cruiser. Officer Rains, a short guy with a calm voice who'd already visited the house once before. He stepped out and raised his hand to the group. "I'm going to need you all to step off the property." My mom immediately flipped the switch. "This is a family matter, officer. We have paperwork. This is our home too." "No, ma'am," he said, already sounding tired. "I've seen the paperwork. The deed's in Evan's name. You're trespassing. Unless you want to get cuffed in front of a moving crew, I suggest you leave. Now." Frank looked like he was about to argue, but one glance at the badge and he folded. Caleb muttered something under his breath. My mom. She turned to face the door one last time and yelled through the wood. You'll regret this, Evan. Families don't forget betrayal. Then they left. Again. But this time it broke me. Not on the outside. I stayed composed long enough to thank the officer, nod at the neighbors peeking from behind their blinds, and lock the door behind me. But the second I was alone, I lost it. I sank to the kitchen floor, curled against the dishwasher like a child, and cried harder than I had in years. Not just from fear or anger, but from grief. Grief over the family I used to believe in. Over the idea that somewhere deep down, they still cared about me. That maybe, just maybe, if I explained enough, or gave them time, they'd come around. That illusion shattered on my tile floor, somewhere between Caleb's threats and my mother's chilling final words. I didn't leave the house for 2 days. I let the groceries rot in the car. I didn't answer texts. I ignored work emails. I just wandered the halls like a ghost, not eating, not speaking, not sleeping. The house felt too big suddenly, too quiet. Every picture frame on the wall mocked me. This is what they're after, they seemed to whisper. Not you. Just this. I hit rock bottom around 3 a.m. on the third night. I found myself in Grandpa's old study, sitting in his creaky leather chair, thumbing through an old photo album he kept in the bottom drawer. Birthdays, fishing trips, Christmas mornings with wrapping paper everywhere. Caleb was in half the pictures, but he always looked distracted. I was in the others, always looking at Grandma. She had a way of smiling with her whole face. On the inside cover, Grandpa had written in thick marker, "To Evan, may this house always be a home." I cried again, but it wasn't the same kind of crying. It wasn't despair. It was resolve, because I remembered why I was here, why they gave it to me. Not because I was smarter or better, but because I showed up. Because I sat by Grandma's bed when she forgot my name, but still held my hand. Because I held Grandpa's arm as he limped through the garden one last time before the morphine took over. Because I was present. They didn't leave me the house because I deserved it. They left it because I earned it. And that's when the fog began to lift. I stood up. I opened the windows. I showered for the first time in days. I texted Jared, ready to push back. What came next wasn't flashy. It wasn't dramatic or loud. It was steady. I started small, called a locksmith and changed every lock on the property, upgraded the security system, installed cameras, motion lights, and a smart doorbell that sent alerts straight to my phone. I didn't post about it, didn't brag, just took precautions. Next, I got serious about work. I'd been freelancing in digital marketing for years, decent clients, good pay, but I'd been coasting. So I reached out to some old connections, pitched myself like I was applying for a Fortune 500 job, got 2 new contracts in 1 week. One of them was a retainer that nearly doubled my monthly income. Money meant options. Options meant power. I started putting aside a war chest, not for revenge, not yet, but just in case this dragged into court. Jared helped me draft a cease and desist letter, complete with a notarized warning that further harassment would be met with formal litigation. But most importantly, I started living again, not just surviving. I joined a local gym, took cooking classes on Saturdays, reconnected with my college friend Marcus, who'd just moved back to town. He invited me to trivia nights and weekend hikes. I said yes, even when I didn't feel like it. Especially when I didn't feel like it. The house began to change too. Not physically, not yet, but spiritually. I painted the living room a soft gray Grandma would have loved. I started planting herbs in the backyard. Basil, mint, rosemary, little things, but they made the place feel mine. I even adopted a dog. A 3-legged mutt named Tucker who barked like a maniac every time someone came within 5 feet of the property line. He slept at the foot of my bed like a silent guard, snoring loud enough to drown out the ghosts. And slowly, I found peace. Until last Tuesday. That's when Caleb made one final move. A certified envelope arrived at my doorstep. Inside was a formal letter, drafted by a new lawyer, a real one this time, claiming that the will had been influenced under duress and that my monopolization of family assets was both unethical and legally questionable. Attached was a copy of a court summons. They were suing me for everything: the house, the contents, even back rental fees for living in the property they claimed I had denied access to. It was laughable, but also terrifying, because now it was official. They weren't just playing games. They wanted blood. I stared at the papers in disbelief. Then I picked up my phone, dialed Jared, and said only 4 words. It's go time now. I didn't sleep the night I got served. Not because I was afraid. Okay, maybe a little, but because something else had settled over me. Clarity. Cold, hard, crystalline clarity. That kind of laser-sharp mental focus you get when you finally accept that someone has declared war on you and you stop trying to make peace. No more hoping they'd come to their senses. No more giving them the benefit of the doubt. This was it. They were dragging me to court. They were going to stand in front of a judge and say that I manipulated our dying grandfather. That I was keeping them from what was rightfully theirs. That I somehow tricked 2 people who loved me more than anyone else on this planet into giving me everything while my mother and brother, just watched? It was insulting. But also, it was a gift. Because now the gloves could come off. That night, I cleaned off the big oak desk in Grandpa's study. The one with the leather blotter and the drawer that still smelled faintly of pipe tobacco. I turned it into a war table. Spread out every document I had. The original will, the certified deed, the hospital bills I'd paid, the property tax receipts, even screenshots of texts and emails. I pulled up my cloud backups and printed everything that mattered. Then I called Jared. He picked up with a dry, "So you saw it." "I saw it," I said. "Let's tear them apart." He didn't laugh. Jared never laughed. But he said, "Good. That's the right energy." We met the next day at his office. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, glass conference table, and a coffee machine that hissed like a steam engine. He looked over everything I brought and nodded slowly. "They don't have a case," he said. "They know it. This is a pressure tactic. They're trying to wear you down." "Won't work," I said. "I know. But we're not just going to defend you," he added, flipping through the binder I brought. "We're going to counter. Hard." I leaned forward. "How?" He opened his laptop. "First, we're going to subpoena Caleb's financial records. He's claiming the house is community property? Fine. Let's see if he's been filing taxes under that assumption. Has he declared it as an asset? Paid insurance on it? Contributed a cent to its upkeep? Doubt it. And if we find any financial misconduct on his end, unreported income, bad debts, we can undermine his credibility as a witness. What about my mom? She's going to be tougher. She'll play the grieving mother card. But we have angles." He pulled up the hospital logs I'd printed, dates and times of Grandma's and Grandpa's final stays. "You were listed as the primary emergency contact. You signed every treatment form. They didn't visit once in the last 4 weeks of Grandpa's life. That's going to matter to a judge, especially if we bring in character witnesses." That gave me pause. "Who would testify for me?" "Already made some calls," Jared said. "The hospice nurse, Anna? She remembers you. Said you were the only family who ever showed up on time. She's willing to write an affidavit. Maybe even testify in person. The hospital receptionist, too. Apparently, she remembers how you'd bring your grandfather donuts every Wednesday." I swallowed hard. I hadn't even thought those moments mattered. "But the real nail in the coffin," Jared continued, "is going to be the video." I blinked. "What video?" Jared smiled. Actually smiled, for the first time since I met him. "Your grandfather recorded something," he said. "The lawyer who handled the will, David Goldstein, called me this morning. Said he forgot about it until I mentioned the case. Apparently, your grandfather insisted on filming a short message when he signed the final draft of the will, just to be safe." My throat went dry. "What did he say?" "You'll see." We drove to Goldstein's office that afternoon. The place looked like every other estate law firm. Dusty, quiet, lined with oak paneling and muted green carpet that hadn't been fashionable since 1989. Goldstein himself was in his late 60s, balding, with wire-rimmed glasses and a habit of polishing them whenever he had to say something awkward. He welcomed us in and pulled out an old USB drive from his desk. "No one's seen this but me," he said. "Henry wanted it that way. Said if things ever got ugly, this might help settle it." He plugged it into his computer and double-clicked a file labeled h.thatcher_final.mp4. The screen went black. Then a familiar face appeared. Grandpa, sitting in this very room, dressed in his best navy suit, looking frail but sharp-eyed. He cleared his throat and stared into the camera. "If you're watching this," he began, "then something's gone wrong. And I hate that it came to this. But I want to make myself crystal clear. I am of sound mind. I've reviewed this will with Mr. Goldstein here, and I know exactly what I'm doing." He paused, then leaned closer. I'm leaving the house to Evan. Only Evan. No one else. Because he's the only one who ever earned it. Diane, if you're watching, this isn't personal. But you weren't there when your mother needed you. And Caleb, son, I hope you find your path. But it won't be through this house. This house belongs to the one person who never asked for anything, but always showed up anyway. He leaned back. That's all. I trust that'll be enough. The video ended. Silence fell over the room. I didn't realize I was crying until Jared placed a box of tissues in front of me. Can we use that in court? I asked. He nodded. Oh yeah, that's going to hit like a hammer. I left the office feeling 10 pounds lighter, but also a lot hungrier, because now I had what I needed. The truth, the receipts, the voice of the man they were trying to erase. And it was time to flip the script. Back at home, I started getting organized. I built out a full timeline, every interaction, every stunt they'd pulled, down to the texts and voicemails. Jared helped me formalize it into a statement. I even flagged moments when I'd been harassed in public, like when Caleb confronted me at a grocery store last month and told me, "You're just squatting in my inheritance." We added that to the file too. I wasn't going to play defense anymore. But I didn't stop there. I started reaching out to people who knew my grandparents, church friends, old neighbors, even their gardener, Tony. I asked for stories, memories, anything that could add color to the kind of people they were, and what kind of relationship they had with me. The responses flooded in. Mrs. Callahan, their neighbor from across the street, sent me a scanned note Grandma had written. Evan brought me tulips today. He always remembers the little things. Tony told me Grandpa once gave him a bonus and said, "Use this for your daughter's school trip." Evan would have done the same. It became clear that this wasn't just a legal case. It was a story, my story, and I was going to tell it, in full color, with every receipt, every photo, every signature. Meanwhile, Caleb and Mom kept up the theatrics. I got another letter from their lawyer, some mid-level bulldog from a firm that specialized in family disputes, offering to settle for equal asset distribution if I vacated the property peacefully within 30 days. I wrote back through Jared. My client declines. He is the sole legal owner, and any continued harassment will be used as evidence in a formal countersuit. The tone shifted immediately. 2 days later, I got a voicemail from Mom. No fake lawyer involved this time. Just her voice, brittle, exhausted, and full of venom. "You always think you're so much better than us, Evan. But you're not. You're just a scared little boy hiding behind paperwork. I hope you enjoy your empty house. No one's coming to visit you when you're old and alone." I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded it to Jared and added it to the binder. Because here's the thing about setups. They take time. They're quiet, deliberate. You don't make a big speech. You don't tip your hand. You just gather your pieces, one by one, until the trap is set. And when they least expect it, when they think they're still in control, that's when you spring it. The court date was set for 3 weeks out. I circled the day on the calendar in red ink. And then, I went to work. Court was scheduled for a Monday. I wore my grandfather's navy blue suit, the same one he wore in that video. It had been tailored down a bit. It hung a little loose on me otherwise, but I made sure not to touch the lapel pin. A tiny silver eagle. Grandpa said it reminded him to stay sharp and see everything. I could have used that advice back when all this started. Jared met me at the courthouse steps, calm as ever. He was holding a leather case and chewing on the end of a pen like he was waiting for a chess match to begin. "You ready?" he asked. I nodded. "More than ready." "Good," he said. "Because today's not just about proving them wrong. It's about proving you were right to stand your ground." We entered the courtroom and took our seats on the right side. Opposite us sat my mom, Caleb, and their new lawyer, a stiff, overly confident guy named Gregory Shaw, who introduced himself like he thought he was auditioning for a legal drama. He didn't nod at me, just flipped open his folder like he already knew how the day would end. The judge was a woman in her 50s with short gray hair and tired eyes. Her name was Honorable Judge Kayla Stinson, and from the moment she entered, she radiated an air of no-nonsense fairness. The bailiff called the case number. Gregory stood and began. "Your Honor, we contend that the will in question was signed under emotional duress, influenced by Mr. Evan Thatcher, who had isolated the late Mr. and Mrs. Thatcher from their family during their declining health. Furthermore, we will demonstrate that the defendants, Mrs. Diane Thatcher and her son Caleb, were unjustly excluded from their rightful inheritance due to manipulation, coercion, and undue influence. It sounded rehearsed, like a monologue he'd practiced in the mirror. Jared didn't flinch. When it was his turn, he stood slowly, adjusted his glasses, and said, "Your Honor, we will demonstrate that my client was the only family member consistently present for the deceased during their final years. We will present documentation of financial, emotional, and medical support provided solely by Mr. Thatcher, while the plaintiffs were largely absent. We will also provide evidence, including a direct video statement from the deceased, that the will reflects his true, independent wishes, made with full mental clarity." The judge nodded. "Proceed." The case unfolded over the next several hours. First, we walked through the facts. The will, the notarized transfer of the deed, the mortgage payoff from the inheritance account Grandpa had left for that purpose. Everything matched. Everything lined up. Gregory tried to poke holes, but Jared parried each one with effortless precision. Then came the part one was dreading, the accusations. Gregory brought up Caleb to testify. He strutted up to the stand, all fake humility, and painted himself as the devoted grandson who had regrettably not been there in the final months due to work and mental health issues. He said he always meant to visit, that he called every week, and that he'd had a close bond with Grandpa that was manipulated and severed by me. Jared didn't object. He let him talk. Then, when it was his turn for cross-examination, Jared quietly asked, "Can you name the last medication your grandfather was prescribed?" Caleb blinked. Can you name his attending physician?" I don't remember the name, but can you tell us the name of the hospice nurse assigned to his care?" Caleb's face tightened. "I didn't memorize all that, okay? That's not the point. But you said you had a close bond. Wouldn't someone with a close bond know who was treating him?" The judge glanced down at her notes. Caleb clammed up. Then Jared brought up Anna, the hospice nurse. She was soft-spoken but firm. "Evan was there almost every day," she said. "He asked questions, took notes. He brought his grandfather coffee and his grandmother crossword books. The rest of the family? I never saw them." Next came the video. The moment it started playing, you could hear a pin drop. Caleb shifted in his seat. My mom's eyes narrowed like she was trying to find a flaw in the footage. But there wasn't one. Grandpa's voice filled the courtroom, calm and deliberate, explaining exactly why he left the house to me. Not out of favoritism, but out of trust. When the video ended, no one said a word for a full 10 seconds. Then the judge leaned forward and said, "Thank you. That's very compelling evidence." But Jared wasn't done. He presented the text from my mom, the guilt trips, the veiled threats, the "you'll regret this" messages. He brought out photos of the damage Caleb had done when he tried to move in, the scratched floors, the broken light fixture, the invoice from the movers who'd been hired under false pretenses. And then he did something I didn't expect. He filed a countersuit, right there, for harassment, defamation of character, and property interference. Jared said, "We are requesting damages in the amount of $47,000, which includes repairs, legal fees, and emotional distress supported by medical records from Mr. Thatcher's therapist." Gregory stammered. "That wasn't disclosed." "It's being filed now, Your Honor," Jared replied coolly. "All documentation is present." The judge called a brief recess. My mom stormed out of the courtroom. Caleb trailed behind her like a kicked puppy. I stayed seated, hands folded, breathing slow and steady. 10 minutes later, the judge returned. "Having reviewed the documentation and heard the testimonies, I see no reason to believe that the will was executed under duress. It is valid and binding. The property lawfully belongs to Mr. Evan Thatcher." Gregory tried one last Hail Mary. "Your Honor, perhaps we could request an asset-sharing compromise." Judge Stinson cut him off. "No, that request is denied." Then she turned to my mom and Caleb. "Furthermore, I find that the defendants engaged in a pattern of harassment and misrepresentation that wasted this court's time and resources. I'm approving the countersuit for damages in the amount of $41,500, slightly less than requested, but sufficient to account for verified costs and emotional distress." She banged the gavel. Case closed. It was over, and it was glorious. The fallout came fast. Caleb tried to delay the payment. Jared filed for wage garnishment within the week. My mom sent me one final text. "You've turned your back on your family. Hope you enjoy the house." Alone. I didn't respond. Not out of malice. Just peace. Because she was wrong. I wasn't alone. I had Marcus. I had my neighbors. I had Tucker, who was currently snoring under my desk. And I had something she'd never understand. Freedom. Not just the freedom to live in my own home without fear, but the freedom to be myself. To know I'd done the right thing. To stand tall in the face of everything they threw at me and say, I stayed true. I held the line. That weekend, I hosted a dinner party. Nothing big. Just 6 people. Marcus brought wine. Anna, the hospice nurse, came with her husband. Jared even stopped by, dressed down for once, and brought his wife and kid. We grilled in the backyard and ate under the string lights I'd finally gotten around to hanging. At one point, I looked around the yard, the laughter, the shared food, the warmth, and realized this house finally felt like a home again. A new one, built not just on old memories, but on new beginnings. That night, as I locked up and turned out the lights, I passed Grandpa's study. I paused, looked at his photo on the shelf, and smiled. You were right, I whispered. They didn't win. Then I walked upstairs, the halls quiet, the air peaceful, the future mine. And for the first time in a long, long time, I slept without looking over my shoulder.